For years, a predator moved through California like a ghost breaking into homes, stalking neighborhoods, and leaving survivors terrified. People gave him different names in different places because, at the time, it didn't look like one person, it looked like a whole string of separate nightmares. But over time, investigators started to believe the truth was simpler and scarier. One offender, one pattern, and a trail that stretched across years. This case is now most widely connected to Joseph James DeAngelo, also known as the Golden State Killer. Investigators linked him to a long crime spree in California that included burglaries, sexual assaults, and murders, spanning the 1,970 seconds and 1,980 seconds. And one of the details that still shocks people is that DeAngelo had law enforcement experience earlier in his life. Training, discipline, and knowledge that could help someone stay calculated and avoid getting caught. Back then, law enforcement didn't have the tools we take for granted today. No smartphones, no ring cameras, no modern databases that talk to each other instantly, and DNA science was nowhere near what it is now. So even when investigators had good instincts, and even when communities were on high alert, it was still possible for someone careful to keep slipping through. What made the crimes feel especially terrifying wasn't just the violence, it was the control. The sense that someone was watching first, learning routines, knowing where to go and when to move. The fear didn't stay in one house or one street. It spread across neighborhoods because people couldn't tell who would be next or when it would end. For a long time, the case stayed open like a wound. People kept asking the same question: how does somebody do all of that and then just disappear? How does a person go from being the face of fear to blending in like an ordinary neighbor? The breakthrough came decades later, when investigators were able to use advances in DNA technology to push old cases forward. New methods made it possible to connect evidence across time in ways that simply weren't available in the original years of the crimes. The walls that protected old secrets started cracking. In 2018, DeAngelo was arrested. After years of the public knowing the fear, but not the face, the ghost finally had a name. For survivors and families, that moment wasn't a movie ending. It didn't erase the past. But for many, it was the first time in decades they felt like the world finally saw what they had been carrying. Then came the courtroom chapter, because an arrest is one thing, but the court record is the receipt people argue about. In 2020, DeAngelo pleaded guilty in a deal that removed the death penalty from the table. That plea meant the case moved toward sentencing without a full trial, and it locked in accountability in a way that couldn't be waved off as just rumors or just theories. At sentencing, survivors and families were given space to speak, and those moments matter because this case wasn't just about evidence. It was about the human cost lives changed forever, families reshaped by fear, and years that can never be given back. The sentence was designed to make one point clear: he would not be walking free. Multiple life sentences were imposed, structured to keep him in prison for the rest of his life. That's the official outcome, no matter what people argue about online. And even with that outcome, people still ask why, because the harm was so wide and so personal. This wasn't one event. It was a long shadow over multiple communities. Survivors lived with it, families lived with it, entire neighborhoods lived with it. If you're hearing this and thinking, I still want the deeper timeline, you're not alone. Because the story isn't just what happened, it's how it stayed hidden for so long, and how it finally got exposed. If you want the deeper breakdown, the next part would focus on the investigation, how the cases were connected across the pressure in regions, what patterns investigators watched for, and what key moments turned a decades-old mystery into an arrest.